Let me know if, thank you very much. Let me know if you are unable to see the screen, but I think you should be able to. And I'm gonna welcome you to this webinar today. We're gonna go over an introduction to open peer review. This is an adapted version of the typical workshop that we provide at Peer Review. We usually do a 2-hour workshop. This is a slightly shortened version, which means we're not going to do one of the breakout activities we usually do. But hopefully you'll find a lot of information here. I hope if you were able to join us last week, this is very complementary to what we went through last week about preprints. And if you weren't able to join us, perhaps you watched the recording, and that would be great as well. If you have any questions throughout the whole workshop today, you can pop them into the chat. You can also use your raise hand function, and we'll ask you to unmute and ask a question. And I'm going to pass over now to my co-facilitator, Annette, who's going to go through some introductions as well as our code of conduct and guidelines for today.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to turn my camera on for a bit. I joined on mobile one, yes. Thank you very much, Vanessa. Really glad to be talking about preprints and preprints review today again. As stated, we had the first session last week. We focused on preprints, and today we are going into preprints review. I hope everybody can hear me well. Yes, thank you. So my name is Annette David. I'm an academician and research scientist in Tanzania. I am a biotechnologist. I focus on microbiome research, but also farming systems. I'm a champion or advocate for open research. I believe in the cause wholeheartedly. I live in Dar es Salaam with my family and my little research assistant, you can see there, my son. And one thing about me, I love nature. You find me everywhere, the trees and mountains. I love to read and I love plants. Next slide. Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
can say a
back to
little
you.
bit about me. So I've said hello in the chat, but my name is Vanessa Fairhurst. I am head of community at Peer Review. So I'm in charge of a lot of our training events and our community champions program and our community engagement things. I have worked within the open science space within about 10 years, usually with a community background. But my own background is in kind of applied and professional ethics, and that's kind of how I ended up working within this space. So I'm not actually a scientist myself. I live in Oxford in the UK with my husband. We have a baby on the way, so next year is going to be a whole new challenge for us. And outside of work and the science space, I also play a lot of board games. I read a lot of fantasy fiction, so I like to adventure, and I'm very curious a lot of the time. Okay, I'll pass back to.
Meeting. So this webinar follows the Chatham House rules, meaning everybody is free to use the information from this discussion and presentations, but is not allowed to reveal who said what or made which particular comment. But also, please feel free to eat, stretch, move, step away as you need as the session goes on. But also try to make space for others who may be less comfortable to talk to you. It may mean to pause between comments, to speak loudly, and to just allow others to contribute as well. Please be open, to curious about and respectful of different opinions and experiences. Is there any other group agreement or guidelines, something we can add before we continue? You can raise a hand, unmute, type in the chat. There is a comment in the chat. Vanessa, can you check?
Yes, there's a question about the server website and a general highlight. So at the end of the call today, we're going to have a demonstration of the preview website, which is how you can engage in reviewing preprints. Last week, we went over kind of how to submit a preprint. So if you have a preprint of your own, a manuscript that you want to submit to a server, the information is in that webinar and you can review the recording. But today we will have a demonstration of the peer review itself website. So how you can go about engaging in peer review and writing and posting your own peer reviews on peer review. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, thanks. If there are no further group agreements, some technical details, technical guidelines, please stay muted unless you are talking to limit background noise which can interfere with the presentation or the discussion. You can ask questions at any time by using a raise hand function, but also can unmute and speak, or you can type in the chat. Again, try to speak slowly and clearly, and if the facilitators or somebody else is speaking a bit too fast or too low, you can type in the chat or just unmute and say, please speak up or speak slowly. I tend to speak fast sometimes myself, I know. There are captions associated with this presentation. I can't see them yet. But please, you can keep the camera on if you're able to, but if not, it's okay. But sometimes it helps to see who is speaking. And you can use the reactions to share what you're thinking, like the thumbs up, a clap, or something like that. Next to the code of conduct. So yeah, we are committed to fostering a learning space where everybody feels safe. We expect everybody to abide to the pre-review code of conduct during this session. And some of the expected behavior from participants are using a welcoming and inclusive language, providing feedback that is constructive, that is useful to the receiver, being respectful of different viewpoints and experiences, gracefully accepting constructive criticism when it comes, showing empathy towards other participants and community members. But if you feel uncomfortable or unwelcome at any point during this meeting, you can send an email to report@prereview.org. I hope you can see it in the chat. There is also a link to the code of conduct, or you can report via code of conduct incident report form. But yeah, all reports will be handled directly by the pre-review safety team. Yeah. Thank you. So some objectives for today. It's one of the first objective is to learn the difference between traditional peer review and open peer review, to learn strategies, to write a manuscript review that reduce bias, offer constructive, clear, and actionable peer review feedback, which is very important, but also to understand how and why people should contribute to review of preprints, especially at pre-review platform, which is available at prereview.org. So these are the objectives, and we hope by the end of this session, these are the things we aim to achieve together. So to start, please look at the images and choose an image that best represents your idea of peer review, the main topic of discussion today. You can type a number in the chat, what represent, when you hear the word peer review, what image among these represent first? Represent the most, it represents you the most. You're gonna spend maybe 1-2 minutes to give people time to type in the chat.
Thanks, Aneth. So yeah, the idea is just without us telling you about peer review, what is your initial thoughts about it based on your own experiences, what you've heard from other people? Put your number in the chat, and if you want to also say why you have chosen that, that'd be great.
I see some entries already. I'm gonna try to open my chat.
And I see that Lynette is having some issues seeing the images, but everyone else seems to be able to see them. So, Lynette, do you want to perhaps leave the meeting and come back in? We'll let you back in and see if that fixes the issue. Sorry about this. I think it might be something to do with the connection.
A lot of people are choosing 7.
Mm.
There's 3, 10, and there is a comment. I don't no. There's a reason. Somebody chose 10, and they say the reason is that we go back and forth while reviewing, pulling in different directions. 5 do a lot of thinking and sometimes staring at the manuscript. 7, I believe it is about community feedback and working together. 7 implies sharing and cooperating. Okay, these are all interesting feedback points. So let's look at what peer review is. I'm going to move my device. So about peer review, what peer review means, essentially, it's evaluation of work by one or more people with similar competencies to the person who produced the work. And it's just evaluation to see if what the work says has been done the way it says it has been done. And usually it functions as a form of sort of self-regulation by a qualified member of a profession within the relevant field. That's a definition from Wikipedia. And so in research communication or science communication, it just means it's a way to make sure that the integrity of the research process is maintained. If you say I did X, we need somebody else, and if it is. So for many people, this image represents the process of peer review, where something comes in and there is a black box sort of process that processes the work or the manuscripts, and it comes out whether it's rejected or not. And for other people, you go next. Peer review can look a lot like this image, where researchers present their works to other qualified members of within the same expertise, and they just hope for the best. And people, the qualified member of the expertise, it may seem like they're out there to get you or to get the work out. That is how peer review comes across to many people.
And I'd like
Next.
to ask a question here, actually, before we move on. Looking at the cartoon on the right, what do people notice about this particular cartoon? This is like a cartoon that's often used to describe peer review. I wouldn't say it's the most positive cartoon about peer review, but if you didn't know anything about it, the process before, what would you take from this image? This is reality, Alice says. It seems brutal. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? They bash you so much you get scared to continue. Yeah. Yeah, it's very much, this cartoon is very much portraying it as kind of a difficult process, right? So you've got, oh, comments are razor sharp. I like that observation. Running to publish your work and defend your work, and the process is harsh. People are out to cut up your paper. Yeah, so this image is not very complimentary of the peer review process. So you kind of have like someone at the front there with that paper. They've got all these people they have to get past before they get their paper accepted. At the very end there, you might see that the last figure actually is like death. So that's kind of the publish or perish idea, the principle there. They've all got quite harsh looking weapons. They're not really some on your side, are they? The peer reviewers in this image. Also, something I would like to highlight, and we're going to talk about a little bit more, is that all of these people seem to be of a very similar demographic. So they're all white, they all seem fairly senior, and this is the typical image of a peer reviewer within the system. So they may not also be representative of the person whose work is being reviewed, right? So just some things, very male. Yeah, exactly. So just some things to point out there about that image. Yeah, thank you for all your comments. All right. Sorry, Aneth, I'll pass back to you now.
Thank you. So that is the view many people have of peer review, and it is not supposed to be that way because that is not the function to sort of make the research communication process more difficult. But the way peer review is conducted at the moment is unequitable and unsustainable. Um, as we said, peer review being the process where scholarly work is evaluated by others with similar competencies. At the moment, the process is deeply flawed. It is a very important process. Peer review ensures the integrity of the research communication process or the science processes but it is a flawed process. It's not a perfect process. And one of the challenges is the pool of reviewers being very small, often insufficient number of reviewers. If anybody has submitted a paper for publication, they know how long it can take to publish a paper, and large part of that is because there are not enough people to do review work, so you have to wait for a long time. But also, the composition do the peer review process mostly. So sorry, a call came in. Can you still hear me?
Yes, can still hear you. You broke up a little, but we
Oh,
can
thank
still
you.
hear you.
Yes. So the pool from people where reviewers come from for peer review is usually homogeneous in many dimensions. And there is a study which showed that most of the reviewers are male, mid to late career researchers, and usually they're selected by journal editors as experts in their fields. But most of these people also, again, have not received any formal training in conducting peer review. And these issues can lead to a number or a host of other issues when it comes to the process of research or scholarly communication. Next. So, as we said, it's a scholarly review of work by peers or experts in the field. And this is a study that showed that most of these reviewers are male and North Americans, and some of them actually act as gatekeepers. They are gatekeepers who are senior editors, review editors, and peer reviewers. And when you submit your work before it goes to other people to review, to the peers, editors or section editors have to take a look at it. And the challenge is when you have a limited diversity of people doing this work, they come with a different perspectives and expectations and experiences. So this may lead to many or most of the works being judged unfairly because the work comes from all over the world, but the reviewers come from a limited pool of people. And this leads more to gatekeeping instead of facilitating the process of scholarly communication. And 75% of these gatekeepers were men, and 6% of the gatekeepers were from North America, 32% from Europe, 5.7% from Asia, and less than 2% from South America, Oceania, and Africa. And we can see where the challenges start coming with this kind of composition. But also another challenge is who is acknowledged as an expert, who is trusted to be part of this peer review system. This survey showed that about half of the respondents were postdocs, and they had never done an independent peer review. But next slide. But these people were still experienced in a peer review system as co-reviewers. It's very common when you find senior researchers, when they get requests for review, they accept review, but they also give this work to junior researchers, postdocs, master's, PhD students who can read critically, they can provide inputs, but when the work is submitted in, they are not acknowledged as people who were part of these review processes. So this is one of the challenges of the current peer review system, where some of the people who are doing the reviewing work, they are not acknowledged in the process for peer review. Next. So if we can redefine peer review, we could say peer review is the act of providing constructive, clear, and actionable feedback on openly shared research outputs. It is carried by individuals with relevant expertise and/or experience and grounded in a spirit of mutual respect and gratitude, where feedback is both sought and valued as a meaningful contribution to advanced knowledge. This is the definition or the way pre-review sees the process of peer review. I hope when I say pre-review and peer reviews, it sounds differently. But so at pre-review, what we're trying to do is to reimagine the process of peer review, which is essential to the integrity of the research communication, to make sure that it is more constructive, feedback is clear and actionable, and more people, as long as people have expertise and experience, not just the traditionally defined as experts, can contribute into the process, and there is mutual respect and gratitude or acknowledgement. Next. So next, we'd like to know what makes the process of peer review open. We're going to do a little exercise in Mentimeter. You can go, I think the link is going to be pasted in the chat. You can scan the QR code, but also you can go to menti.com and then add the code or just click the link. It's going to be shared in the chat. In the meantime, you can scan the QR code or just go to menti.com. Yeah, the link is in chat already, and add the code and share in a few minutes, share your perspective, like what makes peer review process open. But also, if you're not able to do that on Menti, you can just add in the chat your thoughts on what makes peer review open. So we're gonna take maybe 1-2 minutes, and then we're gonna display what people say. Any responses coming, Vanessa?
Let's take a look. So I will just go over to Menti. Let's see what people have put in. So things that make people, what makes peer review open? So the link is in the chat. We'll keep this open a little bit to see some more things that come through.
Yeah.
Now that we have two things there that are quite the opposites of one another. We've got one that says diversity of people and one that says homogenized groups, which is interesting. So collaboration, transparency, criteria, blind peer review, teamwork.
Done blindly. Collaboration, it is open.
There is one thing to mention that we do not have time to go into. Well, usually I do have a slide about like blind peer review. Like there's different versions of it. There's like single blind peer review, there's double blind peer review. And many people think double blind peer review is kind of like the answer to some of these issues, particularly with bias. And that's where like you anonymize the authors and you also anonymize the reviewers. However, it's not a perfect system, just to say, because there can be issues where it's still possible to identify the authors, particularly if you work in a really small field. It's still possible to identify the authors. There are other things, such as like the institution and things like that, that kind of give that sort of information away or can still kind of bias you in how you review it. And then the other thing to mention is that if it is posted as a preprint, which as we discussed last week is becoming much more common for people to post their work as a preprint before it goes through peer review, it's very easy to look up that preprint and to see the author's names because you would have everything, all the information there. So for that reason, I wouldn't say that double blind peer review is a perfect practice. It's something that lots of people do. But as we'll talk about a bit later, we do it slightly differently at peer review, where we give people the option to put their name or not, to try and give it more transparency that way, instead of trying our best to sort of anonymize it. But hopefully that helps.
Yeah. So I see some entries. The process is transparent. I hope transparency in criteria, transparent, accessible, diversity of people, done blindly, open for all identity. Need for objectivity, different interpretations. Okay. Can know the reviewers accept. Okay. So these are all different ideas regarding open, yeah, peer review process. If you go to next, yeah. But here's what we think makes a peer review process open. The first one is open identities. Authors, review, and reviewers' identities are known to each other. So you know who is reading the work or who read the work and provided feedback, but also the reviewers know the authors. The reports are open and published, so you know what reviewers suggested, but also how the authors addressed the comments. Open participation. Anybody can participate in the in the peer review process. Open interaction, discussion between authors and reviewers or between reviewers is also possible, and it's made open. Other people can see it. Open manuscript posting. So manuscript can be posted as preprints prior to journal-led peer review process, and they can receive feedback as well. Open final versioning and commenting, that is open commenting on the final version of records, yeah, but also open platforms which are decoupled from review. So independent discussion that can be accessed by the community, and the community can see how the review process went. So this is what at pre-review we believe we accept or we propose. What is the right word? This is what open peer review process mean to us. Next. So there are several benefits of engaging with open peer review for early career researchers, people who traditionally would be considered not to have enough expertise or not able to participate in the peer review process. So some of the challenges are lack of confidence. People feel like they do not have the expertise to participate in the peer review process, and familiarity with the process. They don't know where to start. They're not contacted by the journal editors to begin with, but lack of recognition for the work they do. Peer review does take some time and effort to provide constructive feedback to the manuscripts, but also lack of mentorship and guidance. So these are some of the challenges which hold back ECR early career researchers from participating in the peer review process. But next. Instead of lack of confidence, feeling like you're not expert enough to participate, open peer review allows for skill development. You can start from the very beginning and learn into the process of peer review with practice. Instead of fear of, I don't know where to start, I don't know the process, open peer review allows for understanding the publication process, the entire publication process from the beginning, but also it can be beneficial in your own process of publishing your own papers and preprints. Another benefit for early career researchers is acknowledgement, that you don't feel like the work that you do doing peer review is wasted. Peer review, as we'll see a bit later, there is a process where the effort you contribute can be acknowledged in open peer review process. And as for the lack of mentorship and guidance, there is a community usually around open peer review, and at pre-review, there is a community that allows people to learn from one another and to address concerns as they come. So we're gonna see some of these elements later today. Next. So we covered preprints in the last session. These are works of scholarly works or research works processes, not just manuscripts, but they can be at different stages of the research process. And usually the process to submit a preprint review just involve submit a preprint involves submitting the preprint or the manuscript to a preprint saver. And usually within 48 hours after initial screening, it can be accepted. But it doesn't end there. Nowadays, it's very common to have a review process or commenting process of the preprints. And there are several platforms which already engage. Society and PCI is one of them, but also Prelights and pre-review. And this allows for constructive feedback from the community, ideas, and discussion. And it's not limited to the traditional peer review process where it goes to the editor, but it can be over social media, it can be on the platform. Somebody can sit and construct the peer review and publish it, and yet, but it gives feedback to the authors immediately. They get feedback, things they can improve on. Even sometimes it leads to collaboration. So it's a open process, but also it's I can't say instant, but it's a process that is much faster than the traditional peer review process. Sometimes you get a rejection when you submit your paper for publication in a journal, but you don't even know why it was rejected and how you can improve it when you submit to another journal. Next. So let us look at pre-review, which is a preprint review platform. It allows one to publish reviews of preprints openly, but also it is a resource center and a place for community for people with similar-minded people, like-minded people to me. So pre-review, apart from just from being a platform for publishing preprint reviews, provides training programs for early career researchers or for somebody who has not participated in the peer review process and they're not where should to start. There are resources, materials, and often training and webinars like this to give people skills, knowledge and skills to conduct or engage in the peer review process. But also it's an open platform where anybody with an OKD ORCID ID or ORCID, I'm not sure the right way to pronounce it, can participate by providing open constructive feedback to preprints. And the use of ORCID allows for recognition of these efforts, for these efforts to be recognized. But it also is a platform that allows community engagement where you can learn from others, you can see what other people are doing, pre-review clubs, live reviews, and there was also a champions program whose application I think just closed, but it's just a community of like-minded people engaging in preprint, open preprints review. Next. And there are a number of several resources that people can use for peer review process. As I said, if you're not sure where to start, even if you don't attend the training, these resources can be very useful. There is the reviewer's guide. We'll go through it a bit later today, but also bias reflection guide. As we say, we carry our own personal biases, and these can be reflected in the peer review process, and we'd like to leave them out. But also the review assessment rubric. We're going to go through some of these, especially the first one, the reviewer's guide today. But all these resources are available at prereview.org/resources, and they're freely available to everybody. Next. Next. So that was it for the first part. I'm going to end over back to Vanessa to continue the practical aspects of a review process. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Aneth. So yeah, I'm going to take you through some of the steps that are in the guides that Aneth just talked about. So we have these 3 guidebooks. The first one of these is the reviewer guide, and I'm going to go through some of the steps that I mentioned in the reviewer guide today. So one of the things that's in the reviewer guide is how to write a review following a step-by-step process. So this is particularly useful if you've never written a peer review. Writing a manuscript review for the first time can be quite challenging, especially to do it in a way that's going to be constructive and clear and really going to help the authors to improve their work. But it can also be useful for people who have done many peer reviews, but perhaps have never actually thought about the process, never had any training in it. So we want to provide this kind of easy process to go through to feel like you have written a solid review. And we're going to go through some of these steps together with some examples. So the first one of these steps is actually before you even start writing your review, to check your own biases and assumptions that you are bringing to the review process. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about why that's important, and also how this is not something that people typically are told to do before they write a review, but it is something that we all bring to the process. We all live in a world where we're influenced by the society we live in, how we've grown up, our experiences, all of this type of thing. And that can influence what we think of a paper before we even read it. And I'll go through some examples of this. So before I go into it, would anyone like to provide in the chat or out loud a definition of bias? So what do you think of when you think of bias? It's okay if people don't really have an idea. Cultural bias, yeah, it's a good example. A wrong assumption or a mistake, influenced by your own beliefs and understandings, a preconceived notion about something, all excellent ways of describing it. Thank you very much. Here we've got like kind of the Wikipedia definition, but as people have just shared in the chat, there's lots of different ways you can think about this or say essentially the same thing, but a disproportionate weight in favor of or against an idea, usually in a way that's closed-minded, prejudicial, or unfair. And it's important to note there that it doesn't always have to be a negative thing. You could have a positive bias towards something as well. And here we've just got an example of kind of like, again, this is a cartoon you may have seen before, but here we've got a statistics conference, and the person asking the question is saying, raise your hand if you're familiar with selection bias, which is a very common thing in statistics, and everyone's raising a hand, and therefore from that they just take away that, as you can see, most people know that term, but obviously this is not unbiased because they're already at a statistics conference. And you may have also heard of something called implicit bias. And this is something we can say turns into an action that is unconscious. So it occurs outside of our
Ndio,
perceptive awareness. Sorry, yes?
romance wewe ni mbali. Like I saw somebody alikuwa anasema kuna mtu alichapwa hapa siku ya graduation. Nani alichapwa?
I am going to mute the person who just unmuted because I think it was an accident. But if you do have a question, please do put it into the chat. Thanks. So yeah, you may have heard of implicit bias, which is something that kind of occurs outside of your awareness. So we all have this. Things that may be biased that we don't even realize that we're thinking of, right? And then there's also explicit bias. So this is something that does occur within our awareness. It's something that we're aware that we have a preference for or a preference against. And the thing that's important to notice here is that we want to find strategies to be able to mitigate the impact that our bias has on others so that we can reduce harm. So we kind of want anything that's implicit to be brought up to the surface so that we're aware of it and so that we can then mitigate how this impacts our judgment. And just to say that again, as people have said in the chat already, our understanding of the world informs our research. So our understanding and where we come from and all of our background influences the questions that we ask, how we design our studies, who we allow to participate in the process, how we collect our materials and data, how we interpret results, who we choose to cite, how and where we choose to publish. All of these things are influenced by lots of outside factors, and we bring all of this to the work that we do. Oh, and also one that's missing there as well, but who also gets to share, disseminate what is knowledge and when. And so where does bias come from? I've already talked a little bit about this, but what are the roots of bias? And we're going to have a think about some examples as well in a moment. But bias is rooted in oppression. So it's important to acknowledge that when we're talking about bias, it's natural to feel some resistance or defensiveness. Nobody likes to think of themselves as biased by any means, but we all are. We all bring our own values to the process. So if you feel uncomfortable thinking about some of these things, it's actually a good sign that learning is happening, awareness is happening. What I might be saying might be holding some truth for you. It's a normal response, basically. And here we're not talking about trying to eliminate biases completely because that's kind of impossible, but just mitigating them so we don't negatively impact others. And when we talk about oppression, this is because we live in different systems of oppression. We all do throughout the world, and we have done throughout all of history as well. So these are some examples of systems of oppression that we live within. By this, we mean kind of discriminatory institutions, structures, norms, policies, practices that are embedded into our society and are used to oppress different groups of people at different points in time in different ways. So these might refer to things like the patriarchy, heteronormativity, colonialism, white supremacy culture. These are just examples. But basically, all of these different systems that operate in big ways, all above us, they all still influence our values, our thoughts, what we consider normal. And these also change over time as well, right? So we're going to go into another Mentimeter. And here I'd like to ask you, it's the same link as before, but perhaps we can share that again in the chat. And if you have the link handy, please paste it into the chat again. But what are some examples of bias that you think might appear in the peer review process specifically? And then we're going to have a look at some examples. So again, I'll leave this slide up for the next couple of minutes to give people time to get the link and the code. I'll try and find it again in the chat. Here it is. Thank you. We could keep people another minute or so, and then I'll sort of share some of the things that are coming up for folks. Let me go to my other screen and go to my next thing. So what do you think are some examples of bias that might appear within the peer review process? And we're not talking about you specifically or what you might bring to the peer review process, but just things that you think may appear, things that maybe you've experienced if you've you've been reviewed and you feel like some of the judgments have been maybe perhaps unfair, and why that might be the case. So we've got a few things coming in. Sort of ethnocentric view, personal experiences, gender and cultural bias, institutional background of the researcher. Yeah. The way that we look into standards. Thank you, Hala, in the chat. Yeah, I should have said as well, but if you are unable to access Menti, you can also, of course, use the chat. Cultural beliefs, author's native language. Yep, these are all very good examples. Perception as an amateur. There's bias based on a person's qualification. Yeah. Previous experiences, gender. And these are all things we have seen a lot as well. Competition bias, Peter. Yeah, that's another thing that may come up. Although people should always put if they have a conflict of interest, but not everybody does. How much of the research is known, minimum skills in the area. Yeah, so there's lots of things that can come up when we talk about bias and peer review that can influence a review without actually having anything to do with the quality of the research itself, right? This is things that come up that perhaps you read someone's name, you make a snap judgment, you look at the way it's written and you think, oh, this isn't quite written in, maybe English isn't their first language. That's kind of also irrelevant a lot of the time to whether the research is actually good. You think, oh, this institution, I've never heard of it before, or the opposite way around. And these are things that are nothing to do with the actual paper and the quality of the research. These are just assumptions that people jump to, right? Thank you so much for all of those. I'll go back to my presentation. So going back to this slide, I'm going to go through kind of the first bit and a tool that you can use that is in the reviewer guide if you want to go through this sort of reflection process on your own. And I'll look through an example together now. So this is called the IDEA R2 method. It was developed by Antoinette Foster and she worked in collaboration with us at Peer Review to develop a tool and sort of reflect on your own personal biases. And it goes through 4 stages. So the first one is to identify and evaluate a potential bias. The second stage is to add to it. So adding an absolute term to it. So if you think of things in terms of always or never, it can make things quite black and white. And then you might feel like actually this isn't always the case. Then we're going to reverse it and think if there's any deviations from this belief. And then eventually we'll rephrase it to adjust our reflection and take into account the thought process that we've gone through. The general idea is that just by making the time to pause and think through any biases that we bring, we can usually find gaps in our knowledge or simply that actually it doesn't make sense. So we can update that belief and make sure that we mitigate our judgment. So we'll look at how that looks like with an example. So this is quite a common bias, I would say. So here we've got the senior author is at a late stage of their career and therefore is likely to be very experienced. And knowing this helps me feel more confident in the accuracy and the reliability of the data and the conclusions. So this is catching yourself thinking, oh, this is going to be good before I've even read it, right? So again, highlighting that bias can sometimes also be in preference of something as well as against. Like you might think the exact opposite if you didn't know this person's name or they came from an institution you didn't respect, for example. So identifying, let's dig a little bit deeper where we might hold such a belief. So why do the author's years of experience lead me to believe that the anticipated results and the impact of the research is more trustworthy? So perhaps I think, I know this author, they're renowned in my field. I don't think they would do bad science. They probably do good science. And therefore I think this work is trustworthy. And is this logical? Is there a rationale that supports the notion that experience equals trust in the quality of the research? And we might say on the surface that actually, yes, like them having experience and having gained the respect of the community may indicate that this study is likely good. And then this is the next part we're going to actually add to the statement. So we're going to add an absolute term. So by this, I mean sort of always, guarantee, never into the statement, and then let's see then how it sounds. So if I say, is this always true? So the author is at a late stage of their career, and therefore their experience means that their research is always trustworthy, accurate, and reliable. So now how does this sit with you? So if I say it like that, it kind of makes it a bit more black and white. And sometimes we might think, can that always be the case? Or is this actually, am I being a bit biased here in thinking that this is going to be the case? And at this point, if it makes sense, you might want to reverse it. So here I might want to think, are there situations I can think of in which the years of experience would not influence the quality of the manuscript? So it might be that the senior author has not had time to revise the work. This might be an unfamiliar technique to them. They don't know how to best analyze the data. There's other issues that could come to the fore that just mean just because this person's senior doesn't mean that necessarily they've got all the expertise for this manuscript. And then finally, we can rephrase the original statement, taking into account the reflection we just made. So we could say that although the author's experience and recognition in the field may correlate with sound and rigorous experiments, data analysis, and conclusions, it's not something I can take for granted. There are many factors that could influence a manuscript's need for revision, and I should remember that experience does not necessarily mean that the work is not questionable, or I can be quicker at evaluating the rig of the work. So, are there any questions about sort of thinking things through, taking this lens? I'm just going to check the chat as well. And then if that's the affected bias, why did we reveal the authors? So, as I mentioned before, sometimes it can be quite hard to actually not reveal the authors. If you work within a small field, even if their names are anonymized, you might be able to know who that is. Also, if things are posted as a preprint, it's very easy to find who the authors are. And this is just one example, right? It could be that you receive a paper and, it's written by someone who's anonymous, but they're at a certain institution, for example, and you might also have some things that go along with that. Or there might be there's lots of different things that can influence you, basically. This is just an example to go through. I don't think there's a perfect way to sort of remove all of the different things that could cause you to have some kind of bias in it. So it's more just thinking about the ways in which you may bring bias or preferences to something and trying to mitigate that in your judgment. Just looking through. What key criteria do we use to peer review that's high quality and fair? So we're actually going to go through that next, Lawrence, how to write a good review and ways, strategies you can do to make it more high quality and also more objective as well. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to move on because I want to still have time to do a demo and I want to have time for more questions. And I'm glad that people are asking questions as we go along. And I've just lost my notes. There they are. So moving on to step 2, gain a conceptual understanding. So this might sound obvious, but what we recommend you do when you're doing a peer review is that you actually first read the whole manuscript, just focusing on understanding what the research is about, the hypothesis, the main question, the proposed approach, the conclusions. You can note down things that you're unfamiliar with or questions that you have to come back to later, but try to not jump in to just writing down all the critiques straight away. So try to take a step back and actually just focus on understanding the paper. It's quite difficult to do this actually because it's the instinct is to dive straight into making, making comments, making critiques and things like this. So I'm interested if people have peer reviewed before, is this something that you do? Do you tend to read it once over first? Or is it, do you dive straight into making the comments? I find it quite hard to not dive straight into making the comments. Okay, so you read it all first, that's really good. Okay, great. Well, I definitely try to do this step a lot more. And just try to read the research first of all, before I make any comments. And then step 3 is then to start evaluating, appreciating, and raising concerns. So on your second read through, you can start to identify positive things about the research, as well as any concerns that you have. And this is also a thing to notice here, is that we tend to be more critical than positive. So you can also highlight things that have been done well. It doesn't have to be all negative things. And then you can have your concerns that you have about the research question, the approaches, how people can improve them, highlight them, write them down to help you organize your notes later into a final review. And one way you may want to do this is you may want to structure your concerns into major concerns and minor concerns. A major concern is something that they need to address, the authors need to address before it's recommended for journal publication. So it concerns that if left unaddressed could compromise how people interpret that work. Minor concerns are things that to improve general readability, general comprehension, but if they were left unaddressed would not actually affect the interpretation of the study itself. This is not a perfect categorization. This is up to you to decide what would be a major concern, what would be a minor concern. That might be different for different people. We've got some examples here of what you might consider a major concern. So this could be things like unethical questions or data analysis or collection, conclusions that are not supported by the data, contradictory conclusions, not accounting for or inappropriate discussion of the study limitations, or any major confounding variables that could affect the results, or perhaps issues with experimental design, like insufficient sample size or data, improper controls, inappropriate methodology. These types of things would be considered major concerns. And when we talk about minor concerns, it might be things like technical clarifications, how the data is presented or visualized. Sometimes a graph isn't very clear. Doesn't mean that the actual things in the graph are wrong, but you can't see it properly. Typos, spelling, grammar, phrasing issues, missing or wrong citations. These are more minor things. And there's a note here as well that while it may be tempting to focus on grammatical errors and sentence structure or choice of words, you're not a copy editor. So poor spelling or grammar does not necessarily equal poor research. And that's also a common bias that people bring. When we talk about scientific research, the vast majority of it is written in English, but the vast majority of people producing that research, English is not their first language. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the research is bad if there are any grammatical errors. So it's something to bear in mind. And step 4, also a really important step, is to make sure that you give clear, constructive, and actionable feedback. So you want it to be clear. You want your feedback to be interpreted correctly. You want it to be constructive. You want it to be well received. You want it to be something that people are going to go away and improve their work. You don't want it to be useless or for them to not understand what you're trying to say. And for everything that you give, if you try to give an example of how you can improve it or suggestions, that's also really helpful. And so actionable. So feedback that's more likely to be integrated. So making it so that people can take your concerns, can take your advice, and actually improve their work with it. And actionable doesn't mean that you should not raise a concern if you're not able to provide the right answer. The action could be, please consult with experts in this field. It doesn't need to be the expert as you, right? It could just be that people need to look into certain areas more and improve them for whatever reason. And here I've got an example. I will go through this quite quickly. And again, we would have, if we had more time, perhaps like breakout room or activities to go through these things. But here is an actual example of a peer review comment. So the authors should go back to Statistics 101. First of all, this is attacking the authors at a personal level. It's insulting their intelligence, their education. So it's offensive and unprofessional. It's also useless. Like, what can you do with that? There's nothing there that's constructive for anyone to improve. They don't actually even know what it is that the error is in that, let alone how they can improve it. Here we've got an example, I'm not going to read through it necessarily all, of how to make it more clear, constructive, and actionable. It's obviously much longer because it takes a lot more effort to be able to provide good feedback. One thing you might want to do is to use a sort of method kind of like this. So you might want to say what your interpretation is of the issue, your reason, your recommendation for how to do it better, and also depersonalize it. So you're not here talking about the authors specifically. Here you are focusing on the actual statistical test. So we've got this test is used for data that's distributed normally. My interpretation in green is that the data presented in the manuscript appears to be highly skewed to the left. My reasoning is then that this requires a different version of the test, which makes no assumption on the parameters of the distribution of data. And then you end with kind of your recommendation. So I suggest the use of this other test, and if I'm wrong, I recommend explicitly mentioning this in the method session to justify the choice accordingly. So this is a much more objective way to structure your research, to structure your comments. You're not talking to the authors themselves. You're talking about this particular thing. You're giving your reasons. You're giving your recommendations. You're allowing that you may actually be misinterpreting this yourself, in which case they should make it clearer. And these are ways in which you can make sure that your comments are more clear, constructive, and actionable. And one other thing to mention is that unprofessional reviews, they also disproportionately harm people or scientists who are from marginalized background. So there was a survey done of international participants in STEM fields that was investigating the pervasiveness and the author perceptions of implications of receiving unprofessional comments. And these are some of the things that they reported receiving as comments. So these are actual real examples. So this paper is simply manure. What the authors have done is an insult to science. The author's status as a trans person has distorted his view of sex beyond the biological reality. The author's last name sounds Spanish. I didn't read the manuscript because I'm sure it's full of bad English. So you can see there's a lot of bias that comes into this. They're also just not helpful at all. There's no way for them to improve their research with this. It's insulting, it's discouraging. And the authors of this study into participants in STEM fields found that traditionally underrepresented groups in STEM fields were more likely to perceive negative impacts on their scientific aptitude, their productivity, their career advancement after receiving such an unprofessional review. And this shows that not only is unconstructive feedback a reality in the space of scholarly evaluation, but also underscores the importance of training geared towards understanding the impact of bias in this context and how to write a good review. And this is often an argument I give to people when they talk about, at pre-review, as I'll mention, our platform is completely open. So if you want to come along and you want to provide feedback to preprints, you can do, and you can select where your expertise is best matched, and you can provide feedback. Some of the questions I get from journals and other places are, if you don't vet the reviewers, how can you know that the reviews are going to be good? Well, my question back to them would be, how can you know the reviews are going to be good? Because there's lots of examples of bad reviews by people who have been selected specifically to review that paper. It doesn't take that away, actually. Especially if reviewers' names are anonymized, they feel more confident to be able to say things like this as well. Okay, on to the final steps. Are there any questions about that last section that was a little bit bigger about constructive feedback? In this case, how can the author defend his rights? You would have to, if you received a review like this, I would take it higher up in the journal. And really, these people should not be asked to review again if they do a comment like this. So I would report it to the journal and the editor in this case. On the pre-review platform, we would take a comment like this down, and we would class this as a code of conduct violation. Are there any other questions about this? Thank you for all the comments in the chat as well. They're really good. As I'm presenting, I'm not able to respond to them, but I am reading them, so thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to the final couple of steps. So step 5 is to pulling it all together into a final narrative. So you've made all your comments, you've made all your notes on the paper, and now you want to pull this together into a review that's going to be helpful. And there's no one type of review format, but it can be useful to have like a general structure in mind to help you guide the writing. So you might want to think of structuring it kind of like this. So you might have the important information at the top, your summary of the research, your overall impression, followed by your more details and examples in the center, so your evidence and examples, so your major and your minor issues with clear, constructive, and actionable suggestions on how to address them. And then you can follow up with any additional comments that you have at the bottom. And then you want to check your review before you share it. So take a high-level lens and read it from the perspective of the reader and the author who is receiving this, not yourself as the reviewer. So thinking about step 1, the beliefs and assumptions you identified in yourself. How did you do in your review? Did you manage to keep these in mind, mitigate how they may affect your judgment? Thinking about step 3, do you highlight strengths as well as weaknesses? Step 4, does it sound as constructive, clear, and actionable as it can be? And then finally, does your review read well from the summary to the end? And that's kind of our guidance on that. I'm going to share at the end of today that we are going to have an opportunity to write a collaborative review. So we've chosen a couple of preprints. And if you want to try this out, we're going to be kind of collecting comments on these preprints and then putting it all together into a final review that we will then share on pre-review. And if you contribute to this, we can also credit you as a review author with your ORCID ID. And I'm going to show you kind of how that works. There is a video in the slides, so you can review this later. But I thought it might also be helpful to just show you how it actually works on the pre-review platform if you wish to engage with us there. So if I just close this screen, bear with me 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing just so I can share my correct screen and see what I'm doing properly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go to prereview.org, and this is our website at Prereview. And you can see here that you can dive straight into reviewing a preprint. There's also lots of other things to explore. So there's, you can read reviews, you can see some preprints that got reviews. There's requests, so people can request feedback on their preprint, and you can view the request and select one that you feel would be good. There's clubs, so if you want to connect with other people and review as part of a collaborative club, you can look at what clubs are available. And there's also our trainings as well. So to go through the process of how actually writing a review would look like, I am going to go on to requests. And I'm just going to choose perhaps this top one here. So someone has requested feedback specifically on this paper. And I am going, so I can write a review directly from here. I can also go back to the preprint and I can find the link to the preprint here. I can read it. At the moment, nobody has reviewed this particular one. The request only came in today, actually. So I can read it and it will take me straight to the preprint, which is on medRxiv. I'm also going to put here sandbox peer review because I don't want to actually be publishing a review today. I just want to be showing you, but you can use the sandbox yourself. So it's just by putting sandbox at the start. So if you want to test how the peer review platform works, anyone can do this and it won't actually publish a review. So you can test it in safe mode, as it were. So I might go with write a review. I've read this paper. So in this example, I have read the paper over once. I have thought about what biases I might be bringing to it, any sort of assumptions I might be bringing to this. Maybe I've heard one of these authors' names before, something like this. And I'm going to write a review. So before I start, I'm going to check that this is the paper I want to review. It is. If you find a paper somewhere else that you want to review on a preprint server, you just copy and paste the DOI into prereview.org and it will bring you to this page and check that this is the paper you want to review. Before you start, it'll ask you to log in with an ORCID. I believe I'm already logged in at this point, but if you weren't, then it would ask you to log in. And if you don't have an ORCID ID, you can create one. So there's a bit of information about what it is. And if you click this, it should take you to the ORCID website and you can create an identifier for yourself. This is something that easily identifies people with a similar name from people with a similar name. And it also lets you have a scholarly record where you can put all of your research outputs. So it's a really nice thing to be able to easily share. Here's all my research outputs that I've done. Here's all the other things that I've done, like the other research activities like writing peer review reports. And it's free, it's very easy to get, so I recommend getting one anyway. I can start my review. Oh, I haven't logged in. I'm going to log into ORCID. And here we go. So how would I like to start my pre-review? So there's 3 different ways here. We've got I've already written the review, so maybe if you've written it with other people collaboratively, you might have written it offline on a Word document or however you'd like to do it. You can go there. Did you or any of the authors use AI to generate ideas? We just want to make sure that the reviews are written by people. We don't mind if you use AI to edit your language, but we don't want it to generate the entire review. We want to hear from you as a reviewer, not from the machine. So here I'll say no. And here I can then paste my review. So if I've already written it, I can paste it directly in, and I can also edit how it looks. So I can use bullet points, headers, bold, etc. And I can do it that way. I can also use a basic template. So if I've not already written my review, I can do it that way. And this will give you kind of what we just talked about. So write a short summary, major issues, minor issues. And again, there's some examples of helpful review sections and of good reviewer behavior at the top. Or finally, I can also do it with prompts. So if you want more help to write your review, you can choose this option. And it will take you through a series of questions. I think there's like 10 questions it will take you through to sort of write a review. So, does the introduction explain the objective of the research? You can say, yes, it does. And you can also then add some extra context to your response. We do recommend doing that because if someone just gets a review that is just like, yes, no, partly, again, it's not the most helpful it could be. You want to provide suggestions for how to improve it. You want to make your work as constructive as possible. And again, it will take you through more questions. Are the methods well suited? You might want to say they're somewhat suited, but then, suggestion for improvement can go here. And you can carry on. And as I said, there's quite a few different things here. So there's conclusions, data representations, maybe they're blurry or something. You can, go through this whole thing like that. And it will take you through the whole process. So I'm going to go back to the first bit. I'm going to say, in this case, I've already written the review, and I'm just going to copy and paste here. I've copied and pasted it in. I'm saving and continuing. So now I've finished my review. I've put it in whichever format I want. I've used my template. I've copied and pasted it in. I've gone through all the questions if I wanted to do it that way. And then I can choose how I want to be named on the review report. So I can put my public name, and this will be linked to my ORCID ID. So if I've enabled it on the preview website, it will go straight to there. I don't even have to do it. It's automatically updated on ORCID for me. Very easy, or I can add it myself manually later. If I don't want to put my name, perhaps I'm not very confident, particularly for this particular one, for whatever reason, we can use a pseudonym. So this is mine. I would suggest not displaying to people your pseudonym generally, because you want to keep this private. I don't mind mine being shared because I work at Preview. So it's not completely anonymous. People could, if you shared it, know who you are, but it allows you to put a sort of semi-anonymous name to your review, but in the back end at Preview, we still know who that is. So if somebody did write a really offensive review, we can still take action. We still know who that is. So on here, I'm going to use my public name. And then it will ask me if I reviewed it with anyone else. And if I say yes, and they, yes, and they do want to be listed as authors, I have to say that they agreed, they've read it and they've approved it. And then I can copy in names and email addresses of other authors. And I literally just write their name and their email address straight afterwards. And you can see an example of what that looks like there. And then they will all get an email asking them how they would like to be added to the review. So they also get the same choice. Do they want their public name? Do they want their pseudonym name? And if they have not created an account, they'll be prompted to create an account at that point. So in this example, I'll just say no. Do we have any competing interests? So anything that might interfere with the objectivity. So someone mentioned before competition bias. So, if you've recently worked with your author, you're a rival, you have a personal relationship, anything like that should be disclosed. In this case, I'll say no. And also, are you following the code of conduct? So are you making sure that you're using constructive language, welcoming language? Are you focusing on what's best for the community? So the reviewer, the people that you're writing it for, are you showing empathy? And again, making sure that you're not doing any of these things. So making sure that you're not reviewing your own work, you're not using any insultive comments or personal attacks, you're not providing unconstructive or disruptive feedback. And if we see any of these things, we will take action and take that review down and explain to the reviewer why we've done that. And then you get to your final page. So here we've got the title of the preprint, we've got the server, we've got the name that I've chosen. I can go back and change it if I actually decide, I do want to use my pseudonym in this case. I can just go back and change it. It's pretty easy. I've made my AI declaration that I've not actually used it to generate ideas for my review. And I've declared my competing interests, and then there's my review. So I can also go back and edit it. So I can read over my review. Oh, I've noticed a typo. I can go straight back and edit that part. And now we're ready to publish it. So I've done all my things. I've done all my checks. Again, this is the sandbox version, so it's not actually going to go live. And I can click Publish Review. It will have a CC BY 4.0 license. It will have a DOI from Zenodo. This may not work because we're on the sandbox site, but it has. And this is what you'll see. So pre-review published. Again, this is not a real one. And there's a DOI of the review. You'll see it appear on the pre-review website. It'll also appear in our community Slack and on the Society website as well. And if you want to give us any feedback, you can always schedule an interview with our product team or give us some feedback via a survey. And we'll always try to improve the work. And then we can go back to preprint. And your review would appear here on the right-hand side at that point. So that's kind of how the workflow itself works. You can also do this currently in Spanish and Portuguese as well. We're going to add more languages to the website in future. And as I mentioned, if you want to look into other things, like you want to look into clubs, there's a lot of reviewing clubs. So you might feel like, I have a particular interest in, reviewing dental articles. You can go here and you can see if you can join this club. So you can contact them. Some of the clubs actually have a join link. So this one does, for example. And some of the clubs have lots of reviews, some of them are just getting started. So like the JMIR one, I think this isn't working because I'm on the sandbox version. Actually, this club has a lot of reviews that you could see. So I think it's just not displaying because I'm on the test version of the website. But there's lots of different collaborative groups you can get involved with as well. And I think that's kind of it for my demo. And I want to leave some time at the end for any questions. I'm just going to look in the chat as well. How do I add a review done in a live review to your Orchid ID? You definitely can. So one thing I should have mentioned is that you can also go to my details on your account page on pre-review. Here you've got kind of your name, your Orchid ID, your pseudonym. So again, don't share this page publicly. One thing I haven't got here, because it's a sandbox site, I have actually connected mine, but you can click Connect Orchid Record. And if you can connect it, we will then add the pre-reviews to your Orchid record on your behalf. So there'll be nothing then for you to do other than that step. Everything will be automatically added. Anything on your public name. If you publish on your pseudonym, it won't be added. But if you choose your public name, then it will. You can also upload a picture, you can connect to Slack, tells your Slack name, and also things that are really important to add is things like your career stage, your research interests, your location languages, because we're going to start implementing something hopefully next year of matchmaking. So if you say what your particular research interests are and you want to know when preprint requests, review requests come in a certain topic, for example, we'll be able to notify you that that's what's come in. But we can only do that if you've added this information to your profile page. If that makes sense. You can also add past reviews. Yep, you can. And you should do this. There's no reason why not. You can add them. These would need to be reviews that were done on pre-review itself, I should say. I don't know if you could actually copy and paste reviews that you've already written elsewhere, and because it would be like duplication. I'm not sure. I'd have to check with that. And if you do connect your Orchid ID, it should actually retrospectively add anything. So Shelley, for example, if you've done live reviews and you connect your Orchid ID on preview, it should also add past reviews that you've done. So you shouldn't have to manually add them, but you can let us know if it doesn't do that. How making subgroups. Could you explain what you mean by that? Do you mean by making a club? Yeah, Faith, if the other ones weren't done on preview, I'd check with the journal you've done them for, or the university you've done them for, because there might be certain rules about not them publishing it openly. Also, you can only do it on preview for preprints. So the thing that you're reviewing needs to be a preprint. That's an important thing to note. Hal, if you want to make a subgroup, which I think you mean like a club. So I did say there's lots of clubs you can join, but you can also start your own. So if you're interested in starting a club, it might be for your institution, you might want to be a private club, you might want to make it an open club, that's totally up to you. Just click start a club. I'll see if this works on this version, and it should take you to a form. Fill in this brief form of what your plans are for the club, what topics it's going to be, what you want it to be called, and then we'll get in touch with you and set that up for you. So it's pretty easy to be able to start your own club if you're interested in doing so. It might be a good one to have for the Rising Scholars group if you want to continue reviewing preprints together. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually see folks. And I also do have a couple more slides that I want to go through at the end of just further opportunities. So I will share that now. Should be able to, hopefully you can still see my slides. I think I'm still sharing, screen sharing. Am I screen sharing?
No, you're not.
I'm not. Thank you. All right.
See.
Was anyone able to see? Were you able to see the demo?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. If I wasn't just talking for ages and nobody could see anything. Okay. So, as I was saying, further opportunities to get involved. So we are going to do a collaborative review. We've chosen these two preprints. So we've got impact of unhealthy eating behaviors on sleep quality among university students. We've got one on the research mind, so a multi-dimensional framework for evaluating research quality, productivity, and integrity by mitigating citation bias. We've chosen these two because they're fairly broad in topic, so it's not something that you need to have really niche expertise on. If you want to be involved, we have a form that you can fill in. I can't grab the link for that, so Andy, if you could please grab the link for the form. And you can add your name and email address, and I will then email you with next steps on how to do this. So we're going to have basically a collaborative template. There'll be questions, and you add your comments to the questions. And if you wish to be then credited for the work and your contributions, then you can do so. If you wish to help us compile it into the final review, that'd also be great. And there's an option to say that you would like to do that in the form. So please fill that in, and we'll be in touch with more information on how we're going to do that afterwards. I'm just going to check the chat for any other questions. Can we mention previews you've done on LinkedIn? Yes, please do. I would love it if people shared more reviews that you've written on LinkedIn, social media. Please tag pre-review as well on that. Please tell other people that you've had a positive experience. We would love people to do that more. So thank you. Anthony, if you could please fill that in on the form, that would be great, just so that we've got all of the emails and names in one place. That would be fantastic. And what you can also do next, so join our collaborative review, if you'd be happy to do so. You can create an account and preview, as I showed you, fill in your profile. You can start reviewing, so you can read through some requests that have come in. You can join our Slack conversation as well. And you can also, we've got a bi-monthly newsletter that goes out with lots of different opportunities to get involved, our training events, this type of thing as well. So Andy, again, if you can share the links to those in the chat, that would be great. And those are different ways you can get involved with us. And then we've got 5 minutes left, so I'd like to answer any final questions that anyone has. And thank you all for being so engaged today. It's been great to see so many comments in the chat. And I hope that this has been a useful session for everyone. Thank you, Andy, for joining all of that, for sharing that. So yeah, any final comments for the last 5 minutes of today? All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I think we can stop the recording, and just say thank you so much, everyone. Oh, there is a question. Hang on. I haven't given
here they
people
come.
enough time. Yeah. How can you join Slack? Yep, the link is just above. So if you click that bit.ly link that Andy has shared, it says bit.ly preview Slack. It should take you to a page. It should take you to a page. It's not actually opening for me. I'll put it in an email. Let me see if I can just grab the link to that. It should take you to a page to.
Yeah, it does works for me. Yeah.
Oh, it does. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay.
So you have to add your name and address details to be added to the Slack. Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
That's right. And then I will get an email, and then I'll manually add you. So if there's a bit of a delay, it's not because something's gone wrong. It's just maybe I haven't got to the email yet. You have a question on preprints. Faith, yeah, do you want to add your question in the chat? Or do you want to say it out loud? Do you want to unmute and ask your question out loud?
Hi, I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think it's easier if I ask it out loud. I wasn't in the previous session. So my question is, I had a preprint and then later on it was published, but I still get these email notifications from different journals asking me to share my research because they have access to the preprint on ResearchGate. But I believe ethically I can't do that because the paper has already been published in a reputable journal. So how do I go about that? Or should I rather just keep ignoring those emails and leave the preprint on ResearchGate?
So I think you're right. I would say leaving the preprint. but you could ask the journal that you've published it with. There should be a way to link the two versions. So you can add metadata that links the preprint version to the published version, and people should be able to see then that it has been published. So sometimes it might be that other journals are picking it up and thinking that it's not been published yet when it has. So maybe that's something you can ask the journal that you published with and just explain the situation. They should be able to add some metadata to their record that links the two versions together. So I would ask them about that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. It's great that you have so many people want to publish your work though. That's really positive.
Okay,
hello.
Hello.
Thank you for this very informative session. Thank you so much. Okay, I have a question. If I had a preprint and published in one of the preprint servers, can I link it to the ORCID, to my ORCID?
Yes,
Just
you
a little bit.
definitely can. Yes, so if there's not an automatic way like on the peer review website, you would go to the ORCID website and you can click add work. You copy and paste the DOI and the title and any other information you want to add, and you can just add it yourself like that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Looking forward to join the review, the collaborative review.
Great. Thanks so much. Got about 1 minute left. Any other questions? I can see some comments. I'm glad that people have found it a useful session. I realized that it was your review we used as the example one. Your preprint, sorry, that you requested a review on. So that's great. I hadn't put the two and two together.
Yes. Yes.
All right, fantastic. If there's no more comments or questions, then we'll end the session for today. I hope you found it useful, and hope to see you in the collaborative reviews and welcome you to the community. If you'd like to engage in further peer review with us, we'd be very happy to have you. So thank you very much. And thank you to my co-facilitator, Annette, who I think has left the call now because she had to leave a bit early, but I still want to thank her. And thank you to Andy for organising it all, and to all of you for attending.
Thank you so
Vanessa.
much. Let me just say, I'm waiting for your feedbacks and reviews, actually. This is a call for the community just to give feedback and review. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks, Andy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.